Almost everyone I speak to now in med says that they regret something about how they studied in year 12. There's some inefficiency or things that they've learned over the last 5 years that they wish they knew before. And so one of the goals of this video is to just compare how I studied in year 12 versus how I study now and some of the insights that I've gained along the way. So it's important just to start with a few distinctions between studying in year 12 versus studying in uni. In year 12, you have very set subjects, you have regular assessments, and you're almost like forced over that 1 to 2 year period just to grind out exactly what they require from a syllabus kind of perspective. You're basically optimizing for the highest score on the exam. Whereas at uni, you've chosen that particular degree, and you're often learning for life more than learning for an exam. And there's a bit more flexibility. Like, I think it's easier to go beyond the expectations of the like just exams or beyond the syllabus in uni based on your interest. So it is a lot easier in terms of a enjoyment perspective, I think, to study in uni. But some people get a bit more of the motivational pull just to like grind it out in year 12, seeing that there's a clear stop date. Additionally, I think year 12 can have quite a lot of variety. There's a big difference between studying English, maths, and science. And each of those things is very different. And that alone has more variety than, say, in uni, studying all branches of a different science subject. So if I'm studying, anatomy versus physiology versus pharmacology, like they're all more similar compared to like English is nothing like maths, for example, in terms of how you would study it. So you need a broader array of skills in year 12. But you also need each subject needs its own plan. It's easy to say, all right, do lots of practice questions for maths, but how do you do practice questions for English? So different approaches, different skill sets, which is why it's so rare for someone to do really well across the board. Additionally, year 12 is very fixed in terms of you rock up to school at 8:45, you finish at 3:30, you have that amount of time for that amount of subjects. You come home, you probably have like tutoring for like 1 or 2 hours a day, and there's not that much flexibility in terms of how you can create your own structure. It's pretty even. Whereas uni has complete flexibility. Our lectures were often on demand. You have days off, you have mornings, afternoons, whatever. If you want to study at 10 p.m. in the night, you can. If you want to study at 5 a.m. in the morning, you can. And so it's a lot easier to like come up with a study schedule that works for you in uni. Whereas in year 12, you sort of have to, whether you're a morning person, night person, whatever, you have to do Monday to Friday, these hours. And so that makes it like an additional challenge of studying in year 12. So in lots of these respects, year 12 is hard. And a lot of these factors are working against you, but there's still things that you can optimize to get the most out of what you're doing with your study time and effort in year 12. So this is how I studied in year 12. And while I did well, I would hesitate to recommend copying any of these particular things. Maybe the principles, there's something. But in the holidays, I did a ton of work. I basically treated it like a school day. So I think for the first half of the holidays, I had an actual holiday and I was on exchange for 3 weeks. This is the year 11 to year 12 holidays, by the way. But then after that, it would have been in the morning doing lots of studies. And I actually remember I read the entire textbook, the entire chemistry textbook front to back. I completed the entire maths textbook, every single question I completed. Um, I read all the books for English and I did the maths textbook for both methods and spec. So I basically worked through the entire textbook for three subjects, done my reading for English. And my other subject was German, which I don't think I did too much for. Um, Now, lots of work there, but to be honest, by the time I got to term one, I think the math side of things I was fine with because it's hard to sort of fake maths. Like if you can do the questions once, you'll probably be able to do them later. But the chemistry side, I read the entire textbook and literally like 30 weeks into term one, I'd forgotten everything. Like looking back, that whole effort, which was probably like tens of hours, was just wasted because I read it and I copied down some notes, but it was completely passive. And so that was a mistake looking back. Now, in terms of notes, I generally tried to write my notes down handwritten in class. And before every SAC or assessment, I would condense however many pages of notes I had into a one-page list of things I needed to remember. Now, pros of this approach was like you condense everything down to one page that you think is important. It's a bit easier to learn one page. How I would learn that one page is I literally every morning would just read it until I could remember anything. I'd start reading the start of the sentence and then just finish the rest off in my head. And so, like a week before the SAC, I would just be reading this page of notes. Again, not the most efficient way of doing it, but that's how I did it back in the day. Um, but yeah, like I didn't have pages and pages of notes. Like maybe for chemistry, I'd have like, let's say I had 10 pages of notes for a particular test. And then I condense those 10 pages into one page the week before the test. I read it every single day, and then I sit the test. So yeah, if you've watched my other videos, you'll see the red flags. So that was the one page cheat sheet I tried to make before the test. In terms of English, I literally just wrote lots of practice essays. But the issue is, I didn't get anyone to mark most of them, which was a major mistake. I definitely should have got a friend to mark them, because sometimes, like this, like you max out however many your teacher will mark, however many your tutor you will mark, max that out. Like put always like do as many as they are willing to take. But I really wish I just took someone who was good at English and just said, like, can I read your essays? Can you like read mine and tell me what you think and give me some feedback? So the lack of feedback, I think, was a bit of an issue. When you're just doing like work, and you don't have the feedback in English, that was a challenge for me. Maths is easy because you just look at the answers at the back of the book. So I've talked about the one-page cheat sheet before a test, and I just read that every single time. I don't think there was much more to it. I remember in year 11, I used to start my like specific test revision probably 2 weeks before, but in year 12, I would do some extra revision probably a week before the test. So let's imagine that there was a chemistry test on. During the term, I'd have written down these pages of notes, and then 1 week before, that's when I condense those pages of notes into a one-page cheat sheet, and then every day, maybe I'm doing a few questions and then reading that page of cheat sheets. So there's a lot of work here, but what you'll note is very few of this time is spent in space. Well, there's no spaced repetition besides in that last week. So it's a bit of like cramming, and there's very few, like lots of time spent in passive learning versus active. Maybe I'll talk about that a bit later. Uh, any mistake I made sure to have some sort of learning point from that. So I'd have a mistakes document with all the things in maths that I'd got wrong. Any question I couldn't understand, I would save for later and redo it in the week before my SAC. And the same goes with chemistry. And then chemistry, like everything I got wrong, I would have in essentially a mistakes document, which I would then also read in addition to my cheat sheet. By the end of probably I'm just thinking in terms of term 3 was probably when we finished the content. So from that point, I just did lots of practice exams. I probably did more than 100 in each subject. And by the time we like literally on the term 3, term 4 holidays, I would essentially wake up, do a 3-hour English exam every morning. So that's say 9 to 12, have lunch. Then every day I would do a chemistry exam. I would do one uh, maths exam one maths exam two, and that would probably be most of what I did. So it's every single day, the exact same routine of 3 hours of English, 2 hours of chemistry, 3 hours of maths, and so that like just added up. Um, German is sort of, you know, my fifth subject and getting studied on the side here. But that was my literally like every single day for my last 2 months straight before my exam. And it worked really well for maths and chemistry. But as I said, when you're just doing English essays and you're not getting feedback, that was a mistake I made. Um, Okay, so how do I study now? So before, I used to do a lot of my learning from reading the textbook, uh, which is not great because I just read it and then wrote the notes, uh, which is completely passive. Now I'll try and learn from a multitude of different sources. So when I'm learning about a new topic, I won't just learn from one medium. You might read a bit from the textbook, watch a video on it, then have a discussion with the AI on it, try and teach it to a friend. So combine lots of mediums with your learning. Then in terms of notes, I try not to write many notes. Uh, if I do write notes, they're all copy and pasted things from some sort of text source or AI generated. So I don't spend time writing them out because that's just passive. I'll rather try and if I am copy and pasting them, I'll actively recall them. So an example of that, let's say that there's a particular a lecture on a particular topic and there's one diagram that you want to remember. Rather than like drawing out that diagram or writing out some facts, I might take a screenshot of that, put it in a flashcard, and then use like review the flashcard, or put a screenshot of that, hide it behind a Notion or a OneNote toggle, and then before I review it, I'll try and think, okay, what can I remember about this diagram? I remember this, this, this. Have a look at the note, and then look at what I forgot. So doing active recall rather than passive reading of the notes. Before I was only doing practice questions in like the week before my SAC. Now I do them throughout the year, and I start them earlier before I've necessarily like really confident and learnt the topic. Before I was using pen and paper. Now I just do everything on my computer using tools like Anki for flashcards and Notion for notes. Previously, I essentially only reviewed my material a week before the exam and then daily. But now I'll review things at lengthening in intervals. What that means is if I learn something, like an issue with students in school is you learn something in term one, but the exam's in term four, and then by the time it comes around, you've forgotten it. So I might, let's say I learn it week one of term one, then I might review it at the end of term one, the end of term two, the end of term three, and then before the exam. So you have like spaced reviews of these notes. Another option, which is harder to track but maybe more effective, is you might say, all right, week one of term one, I learn it. Then I'm going to do it week three of term one, week eight of term one, and then end of term two, end of term three. So like you review it at progressively lengthening time intervals. Okay. Now, before I finish, I think it's good to just talk about some, like how I would do year 12 again. And so when you think about like some of these areas that I talked about, I would say, yes, it's good to study on the holidays, but try and spend as much time doing active studying. So yes, you have to learn the topic somehow. And I think I wouldn't just read the textbook. I would probably dissuade people from just like reading a textbook in the holidays. I would rather do it in small chunks where I have a particular topic, I learn through different mediums, and then do some practice questions on it. And then if you want to cover the whole syllabus, you can. It'll be slower, but it will be more better retention. But you also need, if you're going to study on the holidays, you need to come up with intervals to review that material again. Because the main issue for me is I just read the textbook in the holidays and then I didn't review that material again, some of that till term four. No kidding, you're going to forget it. So whatever you learn, you also need to commit to doing some spaced revisiting of that area. In terms of the pre-test routine, I now would avoid me just writing out notes to remember. I'd rather use flashcards for that. And then with flashcards, you can space out the intervals. So I'd be having some like flashcards or practice questions every day rather than just saying, all right, a week before, just come up with these notes and read them every day. Bearing in mind, reading is passive as well. I would keep the mistakes document. I would keep, doing lots of practice questions for maths and chemistry. I would get a friend to mark every English essay that I wrote and give me some feedback every time that I can then implement. And I think these and I'd also have a different plan for each subject, bearing that in mind. I think these strategies work really well for maths and science, but you need to have some way of getting feedback, I think, for the English subjects as well. And language as well is completely different. That was a lot of, listening to videos, speaking in German, etc. I'm pretty happy with how I use the practice exams. I don't really think you need to like start them straight away in the year. I was happy doing them end of term three. So to pull all this strategy together, I think the main takeaways from this video is just think about how you're studying now. How much time are you spending just in passive mode, which is someone else is teaching you things, listening to lectures, reading books, reading notes. Uh, that is good for learning, but it's not the best for retaining. Try and get more time in the active mode, which is recalling things from flashcards or hidden prompts, trying to teach a topic to someone else, doing practice questions. I'd have more of that. If I'm going to learn anything, I will also then set a date when I'm going to revisit it, aiming for getting at least three of those repetitions in before the end of your exam. Whatever you're studying needs feedback. So if you're just writing English essay after English essay with no marking or feedback, it's limited. Yes, you learn how to come up with ideas from different essay prompts, but you don't know what makes a good essay or what you can do better. So get feedback from your friends if you've maxed out your tutor or school teacher. And in terms of exam revision, yes, you're going to have to up your exam revision in the week or 2 weeks or period before your test, but have some level of practice questions and flashcards going throughout the year, because that keeps it active and it also helps you prepare for the exams. I think if you make those sort of general shifts, or at least think about those areas, you'll be well on your way to getting a lot of things right in terms of Year 12 study. If you've got any questions, the comment section is the place to go. I'd love to hear it. And I'll hopefully love to publish videos on how to study for each specific section or subject from people who did really well. So stay tuned for that, and subscribing is probably the best way to do so. Thanks very much, guys.